My name is Natalie, I am 25 years old, and from the very beginning my life has been defined by one word: devaluation. Since my childhood, I was the daughter no one noticed, the silent presence who passed by unnoticed in a family where attention was granted selectively. I grew up believing that someday I would be valued and occupy an important space, yet reality proved cruel. My mother died when I was only 7 years old, and the early loss of that essential figure left a void that could never be filled. A few years after my mother's passing, my father, William, remarried, bringing a new figure into our family, Amber. With her seductive charm and authoritative demeanor, she quickly established herself as the true mistress of the household. Along with Amber came my new sister, Brianna, who soon proved to be the embodiment of perfection. While I remained in the shadows, invisible and forgotten, Brianna was treated as the ideal daughter, receiving every cent, every investment, and every demonstration of affection from my father. Thus, my position in the family was sealed irreversibly. I merely existed, never considered important. Before we get back to the story, let us know where you're watching from, and if this story touches you, make sure to subscribe to the channel because I have something extra special for you tomorrow. Over the years, I learned to accept this imposed role. I was the quiet daughter, the one who caused no trouble and seemingly did not need attention. Yet inside, a flame of resentment and a desire for justice grew. I knew that this situation could not last forever. While Amber consolidated her dominance over the finances in my father's heart, I sought ways to protect what was rightfully mine. Even before traveling abroad, I had taken precautions. I spoke with Jack, the lawyer who had handled my mother's business affairs, and ensured that a legal barrier was established over my money. The turning point came on an ordinary morning. The persistent sound of my cell phone interrupted my sleep, and when I looked at the screen, I saw a name I rarely encountered: Amber. She never called me kindly. Whenever she did, her tone was always sharp and laced with arrogance. Still half asleep, I answered and felt a shiver run down my spine as her voice, calm yet brimming with prepotence, spoke. "Natalie, dear. How are things over there abroad? Enjoying your little new life?" Her words mixed disdain with irony, as if my very existence were a mere detail to be disregarded. Instantly I felt a mixture of irritation and sorrow. As if to remind me that I would never occupy the place she desired, Amber continued in a tone that seemed to announce important news. "I wanted to tell you something before you heard it from others." Her words carried a foreboding sense, and something inside me already sensed the impending betrayal. Without much expectation I asked, "What is it?" Then with calculated coldness she dropped the bombshell. She revealed that my father and she had decided to make an important investment, something that would truly make a difference for our family. For a brief moment time seemed to freeze. My heart raced and my stomach churned. I never imagined that the investment in question would not be for me, but rather to finance Brianna's plastic surgery. Every cent that had been reserved for my future was now, ironically, feeding the vanity of a spoiled girl. "You did what?" My voice, low yet laden with anger, cut through the silence and made it clear that the situation was unacceptable. Amber, in her usual tone, replied indifferently, "Of course we did. You don't need that money right now, do you?" Her laugh, accompanied by an impatient sigh, was the spark that ignited my resolve. As I hung up the phone, I could feel my blood boiling. That call became the catalyst for my decision. I would no longer be the silent, invisible daughter whose existence was treated as secondary. What Amber did not know was that, protected by the legal barrier I had so carefully set up, the money she believed she had taken from me was not actually mine. In truth, the funds used for Brianna's surgery came from my father's finances, a detail that would soon bring the truth to light. Every word Amber spoke during that call fanned the flames of my determination to reverse the injustice. Silently, I smiled with the conviction that once my father discovered the real source of the problem, chaos would be inevitable. Deep down, I knew that this was only the first act of a long revenge. I, the daughter who had spent so many years accepting invisibility, was about to turn the tables. The seed of devaluation planted during my childhood was now sprouting and would soon blossom into a mighty tree of retribution, capable of shaking the very foundations of our family. As the sun set, promising a new day, I reflected on what was to come. The pain accumulated over the years transformed into energy, a driving force pushing me to act. I would no longer be a hostage to Amber's choices or my father's neglect. Every small slight, every insidious message, would be used to prove that the overlooked daughter had the right, and the capability, to rewrite her own story. This was the dawn of a new chapter in which I would no longer be a mere supporting character in my life, but the absolute protagonist of my destiny. Gathering my thoughts in the quiet of my room, I realized that the moment for my revenge had arrived. Amber would never have imagined that her arrogance would be the very cause of her downfall, and with the cold precision of a well-prepared mind, I knew that soon the scales of justice would finally tip in my favor. My story, once marked by contempt and invisibility, was now taking on the first hues of a personal revolution. Closing my eyes, I envisioned a future where every act of devaluation would be repaid in full. The journey ahead would not be merely about money or revenge. It would be the affirmation of my identity, the reclamation of a value that had always belonged to me regardless of others' privileges. The path would be arduous, but the determination to turn pain into strength was far greater than any obstacle. I was ready to rewrite the destiny dictated by a family that had never known how to love me. As the night ended, with Amber's voice still echoing in my memory, I fell asleep certain that this betrayal marked the beginning of the end for those who devalued me. My revenge would be slow, meticulous, and above all, irrevocable. Every moment of that day would serve as living proof that the ignored daughter had finally found her voice, and that voice would now resound with the victory that was always mine. 3 days after the call that shattered my world, a new message arrived. My father, William, reached out by phone, and his voice, usually filled with indifference, now brimmed with tension and remorse. When I answered, I sensed that something grave was unfolding, and a mixture of surprise and amusement coursed through me, for I already knew that Amber and Brianna would finally have to pay for what they had done. "Natalie, we need to talk," he said, his voice strained with an unfamiliar weight of regret. Immediately, I replied with measured irony. "Every time you say that, it means Amber has done something truly foolish, doesn't it?" A brief silence followed, then a deep sigh that revealed the gravity of the problem. My father explained that Amber had spent far more than she was permitted, severely jeopardizing the household finances, and that Brianna, the always spoiled one, had overspent on her surgery. This financial mismanagement, born of Amber's unbridled ambition, threatened to bring the foundations of our family crashing down. "Can you help us?" The plea sounded like a desperate cry, mixed with guilt for having forgotten about me for so long. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. In the past, no one cared when I needed help, yet now my father found himself in trouble and turned to me. With a cool tone, I answered, "How amusing, Dad. You only remember me when things become unbearable. I suppose you'll have to find another solution." As I ended the call, I savored a bitter satisfaction. Every word I uttered felt like a brick laid in the wall that had always separated me from that world of privilege and disdain. That night, as the sounds of the city subsided, I felt that the true counterattack had been set in motion. Every message from Amber, every sarcastic remark, was now part of a larger mechanism that would soon drive her carefully constructed facade into inevitable collapse. In the days that followed, Amber's financial situation visibly worsened. The lavish lifestyle she had always enjoyed began to evaporate inexorably. Monthly shopping sprees, dinners at expensive restaurants, designer clothes, and sparkling jewels were gradually replaced by drastic measures. Every expense cut was a bitter reminder that the fortune which had once propped up her personal empire was slowly draining away. The lifestyle that had made her feel superior now weighed on her like an unbearable burden. One day, Amber called me again, but this time the call was charged with accusations. Her voice, brimming with hostility, accused me of having been negligent with the money that was supposedly available for her. Seething with cold anger, she declared, "Natalie, you knew that money was locked and you never informed us." I managed a cold laugh and replied sharply, "Perhaps I should have warned you before you stole what wasn't yours, Amber." Her tone vacillated between disbelief and rage, yet I remained unshaken. This was not just a matter of figures. It was, above all, a reaffirmation that I would never allow my life to be dictated by injustice. Every word I spoke served as a silent manifesto. Though I had long been ignored, I now stood as the bearer of truth. As conflicts intensified, Amber's illusory empire began to crack. While she desperately tried in vain to maintain her authority, Brianna was also coming to grips with the consequences of a life steeped in privilege. The transformation was inevitable. The imbalance created by financial mismanagement and Amber's arrogance called into question the stability of our entire family. Every notification of overdue bills, every impulsive decision, was yet another step toward collapse. In the darkness of subsequent nights, as my father pondered past mistakes, I sensed that the moment for my long-awaited retribution was drawing near. Each passing day added a new chapter to the story of a daughter who, once invisible, now found herself the protagonist of her own destiny. I was determined to transform the devaluation I had endured for so long into the force that would finally secure my freedom. The family atmosphere, once dominated by unfair privileges and manipulative behavior, was beginning to crumble. Amber's shouts, my father's desperate pleas, and even Brianna's emerging despair all pointed to the inevitable downfall of the regime of devaluation. In that moment, every word, every gesture, resounded with the certainty that justice would soon prevail. Reclaiming my own value was not solely about money. It was a declaration that I would no longer be the victim of a family that had scorned me for far too long. As night fell and silence enveloped the house, I prepared myself to seize control of my destiny. Every text, every tension-filled call, strengthened my resolve that Amber's collapse and the ensuing loss of privileges were only the beginning of my liberation. Harsh though the truth might be, it was the only answer to years of injustice. The unfolding events exposed the true decline of Amber and the collapse of the illusory empire she had built. As she struggled to maintain appearances amid financial hardship, our family environment transformed into a battleground where truth emerged as the sole effective weapon. The contrast between Amber's world of privileges, with Brianna as her perfect reflection, and my long-silenced existence had never been so stark. Every act of disdain, every cutting word, not only revealed their failure to grasp the true value of a person but also highlighted my newfound strength. Soon after the incident that underscored the difference between what was mine and what had been usurped, Brianna, with an unprecedented vulnerability, sought to re-establish contact with me. For the first time in many years, her voice carried the weight of desperation and remorse. In a simple yet emotionally charged message, she wrote, "Natalie, can we talk? Please." Upon reading those words, I experienced a flood of conflicting emotions. Part of me was moved by her sincere plea, while another part, hardened by years of humiliation, saw in it nothing more than a belated attempt to atone for an irreparable mistake. When I answered her call, I heard Brianna's trembling voice, a voice now imbued with genuine regret. She began apologizing, admitting that all her life she had been driven by selfishness and vanity, never realizing the harm her behavior had caused. I, with the cold resolve I had forged over the years of devaluation, replied sarcastically, "How interesting, Brianna. Now that you have nothing left, perhaps you understand what it means to truly lose." My words were firm and unyielding. Even in the face of her heartfelt apology, I could not help but feel that her remorse was insufficient to mend the wounds inflicted over so many years of neglect. After a brief silence, Brianna whispered, "Natalie, I know I was wrong. I was selfish, spoiled, and I never realized what I was doing. Now with everything falling apart, I feel an immense pain and want to say I'm sorry." Although a part of me yearned to retaliate with the same severity I had once suffered, I chose instead to maintain my unwavering stance. This was not solely about revenge. It was about affirming my own value. Every gesture and every word from Brianna reinforced the undeniable truth. The daughter who had been ignored for so long was now reclaiming her rightful space. Meanwhile, the collapse of Amber became increasingly evident. The authority she had once wielded with such pride was now disintegrating with each expense cut and every new financial setback. The empire built on manipulation and privilege was fracturing, and our family's balance was finally tipping toward truth. Every announcement of overdue bills and each reckless decision confirmed that Amber's time was running out. In the solitude of my room as my thoughts swirled, I realized that my personal rebirth was emerging amid these ruins. The pain of constant devaluation had transformed into the impetus for change. I understood that true revenge was not merely about crushing those who hurt me. It was about liberating myself from their bonds and reaffirming my worth with dignity and strength. Every step I took toward freedom was a declaration that I, the long-overlooked daughter, could rise on my own. As the night stretched on and the shadows of the past began to recede, the feeling that a new chapter was beginning grew stronger. Amber's downfall, Brianna's belated remorse, and my father's sorrowful silence were unmistakable signs that the system of privilege and manipulation was teetering on the edge. I knew that at that very moment, the opportunity to rewrite my story had arrived. Every word spoken, every tear held back, was part of the journey that would lead me to redemption. In that quiet solitude, I realized that my personal reconstruction was not simply an act of revenge against those who underestimated me. It was the affirmation that I deserved to be heard, loved, and, above all, valued. I resolved to transform all the pain into strength, to turn contempt into the courage to start anew. Each day that passed was a new step toward a future where I would no longer depend on external approval to feel complete. The silent daughter was finally taking center stage, rising against the tide of injustice that had once kept her down. In the final phase of this long journey, the scene of abuse and neglect transformed into the stage for my ultimate liberation. Amber's collapse and the disintegration of the false perfection embodied by Brianna were only the prelude to the victory I had always dreamed of, even if it had been achieved silently and resolutely. Every action, every word spoken over the years, now converged on the moment when I would no longer yield any ground to contempt or devaluation. The final reversal began when Amber, in a desperate attempt to regain control, turned to lawyers and strategies to reverse the financial blocks I had so carefully established. She tried to argue that she was entitled to a portion of the money left by my mother, attempting to rewrite history in her favor. Yet, to my astonishment, the legal protections I had set up rendered any such move impossible. Every cent, guarded with precision, was immune to her unchecked ambition. While Amber struggled in the face of inescapable truth, my father, William, finally sought redemption. In an encounter that would forever mark our history, he appeared at my apartment door, broken and burdened by the weight of his past mistakes. His eyes, once filled with the confidence fueled by favoritism, now overflowed with guilt and regret. With a trembling voice, he pleaded, "Natalie, please forgive me. I have erred and I can no longer bear the consequences. I need a second chance." Hearing those words, a whirlwind of emotions overtook me. Part of me rejoiced at seeing those who had scorned me now paying the price for their actions. Yet another part recalled every moment of loneliness and neglect. With a firmness that even surprised me, I replied, "Dad, you have lost me forever. It is not merely about money or the mistakes made, but the fact that for years you clung to an illusion of a perfect family while leaving me aside. Now there is no room for reconciliation. You seek a second chance, but I am no longer the little girl who trusted you blindly." My words struck like decisive blows, and the silence that followed attested to the failure of a father who had never offered me what I truly needed: love and recognition. As he attempted, in vain, to justify his actions, I felt that the final victory was sealed. True retribution was not merely witnessing others' financial ruin, it was liberating myself from the emotional chains that had held me captive for so long. Reclaiming my destiny became a process built on the understanding that while the past cannot be changed, the future can indeed be reshaped. From that moment forward, I decided that my revenge would not be an end in itself but the starting point for a new existence. A life in which my autonomy and worth were undeniable. Every day that followed was a firm step toward a future where I would no longer depend on the approval of others to feel whole. The silence that had once accompanied me transformed into the strength that propelled me forward with confidence and purpose. As Amber faded into oblivion, unable to face the consequences of her own actions, and as Brianna found herself isolated without the privileges that had once sustained her, I felt freedom finally materialize. The overwhelming sense of liberation was almost tangible. The daughter who had long been relegated to a secondary role was now rising as the protagonist of her own story. Ultimate victory was not about destroying those who hurt me. It was about affirming that, despite the traumas of the past, I could always rise again. Looking back, I realized that every act of devaluation and every harsh word had fueled the rebirth of my identity. Today, I no longer bear the weight of humiliation. Instead, I carry the certainty that my strength lies in resilience and self-knowledge. Amber, Brianna, and William were left behind as mere shadows of a past that no longer defined who I am. Victory was my freedom and the ability to write a new chapter, one where my worth is recognized and celebrated. With the final checkmate delivered to those who sought to diminish me, I achieved supremacy over my destiny. The narrative that had once been marked by suffering and devaluation was rewritten with the bold strokes of a conqueror. And as the echoes of the final goodbyes faded away, I smiled, knowing that I was finally free to be exactly who I had always dreamed of becoming. What did you think of this story of revenge and justice? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me which moment was your favorite. Would you have done something differently? Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and don't miss any of our stories full of twists and impactful endings.